Howdy, folks. My name is Brian Brushwood, and I host a little show on the internet called Scam School. We call it the show about social engineering at the bar and on the street, which basically means using magic and trickery to fool your friends into buying you free beer. 2 years in a row, iTunes named us a top video podcast. It's kind of hard to see. I'll enhance it for you guys. There we go. What I've noticed, though, is a lot of the same techniques that we use to get people to buy free drinks at Scam School are the exact same techniques used by criminals. So before we get started, for those of you who haven't seen the show, let's take a quick look at the kind of things that we do with our social manipulation skills. I'm going to teach the course as if I was teaching crime, but we don't endorse crime, don't do crime. All right, here's how to commit crime. The dictionary says social engineering is the practical application of sociological principles to particular social problems. I restate that simply as using cheap, dirty psychological tricks to get people to do what you want. Now, keep in mind, when you're going to learn some scientific stuff here coming up in a minute, anytime I sound smart, it's because I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. Brilliant social mechanics, brilliant scientists have written fantastic papers about this, and if you want to see the background on a lot of this, it's all been written up in Robert Cialdini's book, Influence, fantastic work. But let's go ahead and get started with fixed action patterns. These are blindly mechanical stimulus response patterns of action that we all fall into. We see it in all kinds of mating rituals for animals throughout the entire kingdom. And the first one we're going to talk about is a study that proved it in turkeys. Turkeys are a very, very smart animal. They can recognize a friend from an enemy. They can solve some problems. But when it comes to taking care of their young, amazingly, they just rely on a very simple fixed action pattern. They listen to the cheep, cheep sound of the young, and it instantly causes them to want to love and protect them. Now, to prove this, scientists do some nutty stuff. They grab a polecat, the natural predator of the turkey. They take a stuffed polecat and pull it on a string right up to a turkey. First thing turkey does when he sees it, want to kick its ass. But then they press play inside a tape recorder inside the polecat. Polecat makes that cheep, cheep sound, and instantly the bird wants to nurture and protect it. So people, when they see this, they're like, okay, that's animals. Animals are dumb. People are smart. We're reasoning, thinking beings. Maybe. Turns out that there's a bunch of studies that have something to say about that. One of my favorite took place in Harvard. They wanted to know if it was possible to cut in line using a predictable set of terms. So they grabbed a bunch of people they found a bunch of people in line looking for to make copies at a Xerox machine, and they sent in someone undercover to try to cut in line. Now, she said all different combinations of terms. For example, she might walk up and say, "Excuse me, I have 5 pages. Can I use the Xerox machine to cut in line?" 40% of the time, people tell her to bug off, but 60% of the time, they let her go straight up to the front. Now, this blows me away, because when I see 60% just for walking up and saying, "Gimme," but they went a step farther. They tried all different combinations. They also had her go up to the front and say, "Excuse me, I have 5 pages. Can I use the Xerox machine? Because I'm in a rush." And just that little addition of "because I'm in a rush" caused it to jump to 94% success. Now, when you think about this, you're like, okay, it's obvious. She gave a reason, they thought about the reason, they decided it was a good reason, and they went ahead and let her go to the front. Turns out that's not the case, because the magic word is "because." As long as she said the word "because," people didn't even pay attention to what came next, because they assumed that it was a legitimate reason, and they let her go to the front of the line. She even came up saying nonsense stuff. For example, "Excuse me, I have 5 pages. Can I use the Xerox machine? Because I have 5 pages. 94%, straight to the front of the line. So, of course, how can we use these things? Now, we're going to take advantage of 3 psychological backdoors. The first one is most obvious. I think most of us are aware that when you like someone, you're most likely to grant them a favor or do them a favor. Now, of course, you can rely on your natural charm and your wits, but there's also ways to induce a feeling of liking in another person. And the oldest book I think is still the best, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's full of fantastic stuff, like make sure to talk and ask questions about them. People like to think and talk about themselves. Make sure to use their name, remember their name often, call them on birthdays, that kind of thing. And this is something, I had a bunch of conversations with a friend of mine, Mike super talented magician. We both drive around a lot as we tour all over the United States, and you get pulled over from time to time. And he and I came up with some rules to using just the liking fixed action pattern to get out of a speeding ticket. Now, you don't have a lot of time, so you got to be fast. First of all, you got to relax. It's just a ticket. If you get that adrenaline rush, if you're nervous, the side effect of adrenaline is it makes your fingers tremble. When your fingers tremble, it makes the cop nervous. Cop gets nervous, you get a ticket. Second of all, no crying. They deal with that all day long. Yes, it's disappointing, but then if you cry, all it does is it makes them feel really bad as they write you a ticket. I have found that if you can get the cop to laugh, it is amazing. You win the game. I've never had a time that I made a police officer laugh and he still gave me a ticket. And so obviously the first way, I got a few bits of business. Situationally, you might have a chance to make a joke. But regardless, every time they pull me over, the first thing to try to make them laugh sort of takes care of itself. Because when they ask for my ID, this is what I give them right here. Sometimes it takes a little bit more, and when they ask for my insurance, I explain, officer, this is a rental car, I don't have my insurance on me, but I'm told this will help. These aren't valid here? What about the community chat? No? Okay. So if you can get yourself into a position where you're having a real conversation with them, and of course if you're not going 90 in a school zone, the odds are you can work your way to getting just a warning. My friend Brett Rounceville put it best. He said, I know that if I was their friend, there's no way they'd give me a ticket. So the moment I'm pulled over, I figure I got 3 minutes to become their friend. Second backdoor is reciprocation. This is the idea that we hate feeling indebted to somebody else, and no matter what the item is, we want to return the favor to people. And there was an interesting experiment in order to prove this. Dennis Regan of Cornell put together a fake art appreciation experiment where he grabbed people. One was a real tester, one was a fake tester, right? So Mr. Real Tester and Mr. Fake Tester spent all day rating art, saying how they liked it on a scale of 1 to 5. I forget the details. But at some point during the day, Mr. Fake Tester vanishes. And then he comes back one of two ways. In Group A, he came back with nothing. In Group B, he came back with a couple of Cokes and a story about how he went to the bathroom, grabbed himself a Coke, and I figured, hey, what the heck, I'll get one for this other guy as well, so here's a free Coke, right? And then the two of them went back to studying art. Now, at the end of the evening, everybody had the exact same situation. Mr. Fake Tester said, hey man, I'm doing this raffle, and if I sell enough tickets, there's a chance I could win a car. So if you don't mind buying some, as many as you can, the more the better. Amazingly, under reciprocation, when somebody was given a Coke earlier in the day, they bought twice as many tickets as without reciprocation. Now again, on the surface, you look at this, you say, well, Brian, you already said when you like someone, you want to do them a favor. Maybe he just enjoyed the Coke, thinks this guy's a cool guy for buying him a Coke, and gives him twice as many tickets. Turns out that in the exit surveys, even if people actively disliked Mr. Fake Tester, they still bought twice as many tickets. So these are fixed action patterns right here. Now, the Hare Krishnas have done a fantastic job with this. They make sure to give away gifts like the Bhagavad Gita or a flower and then ask you for something in response. You guys could take advantage of this. For those of you who flew in, if you want to get free drinks or possibly an upgrade to first class on your way back, just keep your bag full of M&M bags. And whenever you run into someone, just say, hey, man, I figure you're working really hard. You could use a little snack. Costs you like 35 cents if you buy them in bulk, and yet the perception of the thoughtful gesture could benefit you in the way of a full first-class fare, right? Now, the important thing is it's important that this not look like a bribe. If anyone thinks they're taking a bribe, they get very squirrely and they feel very bad about it. So what you want to do is take advantage of what magicians call time delay. This is a case where you give the gift early, you wait to let it simmer, and then later you find yourself in a position to ask for a favor. That feeling of reciprocation will stay residual for a long time. And the amazing part is regardless of how expensive is the initial token, you'll get something of value in return. Now, on the show Scam School, we actually explained that you don't even have to have a physical object to have somebody want to reciprocate. It could be an awesome story, it could be a good joke, it could be a magic trick, and that's why pretty much reciprocation and liking gets you free beers using Scam School. So what we do, we want to grab people's attention by getting somebody engaged, right? So you're at the bar and you don't know anybody there, but you want somebody to pay attention to you. So we have 3 different classes of tricks. We got openers, tweeners, and closers. Let me show you. You guys want to learn a trick? 3 people. Yes, Brian, I do. This is something that you could do whether or not anybody's paying attention or not. Just grab yourself a book of matches. This might not work. I forgot to ask about fire codes. You guys like that? You want to learn that? All right, here, I'm going to teach you guys something about this. Here's the thing. When you strike a match, you'll notice that there's initial sulfur flash, just a little bit of smoke there. When it burns, you got almost no smoke. When it goes out, that's when you get the most smoke, right? It turns out that if you inhale whatever that sulfur poison is, pretty sure this kills you. It turns out that it'll actually take all the water vapor out of your lungs and manufacture smoke from nowhere. So this, what you do is you bend over, you hunch, you strike towards your face like this. It'll burn a little bit. All right. So when you do an opener, hopefully you've grabbed their attention. But the important thing is they're going to ask you to do it again. Never do it again. Once is a trick, twice is a lesson. Next up, you want to follow up with a tweener. These are a little more interactive. They require stuff like someone to be able to remember a freaking card or to participate. This is one of my favorite tweeners right here. Let's roll video on this one here.
Now, with your left hand, if you can karate chop down and break that one on top.
But I'm saying if he
just break it right in
that
half,
match in half,
I will buy you a beer.
I'll buy him a free drink.
Here we go. And the question is, can he get it? Yeah. Rest of his friends on my side. And then finally we have these payoffs. These are the closers. These are something that if you get somebody to even jokingly promise to buy you a beer, if A, B, or C, if that is my card, or if you did predict my number, then what happens is people have a need to feel consistent. They don't like to, in public, make a promise that they don't intend to keep later on. And hopefully by this point you built up enough rapport that they'll feel good about buying you a drink. So you get a third back door is the most powerful. It's the authority fixed action pattern. Now this one is so potent that it's used very often by con men to defraud other people. And as a matter of fact, the famous con man Frank Abagnale actually toured all over the world because he realized that he could pass the most obviously bogus checks if he was dressed as a figure of authority, whether it be a police officer, a security guard, a pilot, or a doctor. And there's been a number of studies that to see just how far the authority fixed action pattern runs. For example, Leonard Bickman did one study where he had two guys, or the same guy actually, once dressed in plain clothes, once dressed as a security guard, march up and down the street, tell random people to do stuff. Hey, you, stand on the other side of that pole. Hey, you, pick up that piece of trash. And then measure how often they followed his instructions. 42% of the time when he was dressed just as a regular guy, 92% of the time when he was in uniform. And keep in mind, he's got no jurisdiction. Anyone could go rent a security guard costume. Here in Texas, they figured out that the uniform can be nothing more than a well-tailored suit. For example, they went to a busy intersection where people were often waiting for the crosswalk to go, and they had two guys. The same guy actually either dressed in a well-tailored suit or in plain clothes, and then they would have him start jaywalking, and they would count how many people followed him along as he crossed the street. And it turns out when he was dressed in a suit, 3 times as many people would follow him across. And now these are the trappings of authority. Now, of course, I tour with a stage show, and I'm dressed in jeans and a t-shirt. I dressed up to you guys so I could look like an authority. But for example, for me, I use my business card. This is a way to grab people's attention. This thing is an authority trap. You see, you got awards. Nobody knows what any of these awards are. They just see laurel wreaths, and they're like, oh, awards. You got a quote from Jay Leno. Oh, you're on Jay Leno. And oh, no, I was on his show. I don't want to start any rumors. And of course, an engaging photo. For example, look at me. I'm right here. I'm giving a talk here at TEDx. Why? Because I have 0 qualifications. I'm here because I host a show on the internet called Scam School. How did I get to host a show called Scam School? Well, I wrote a book called Cheats, Cons, Swindles, and Tricks, 57 Ways to Scam a Free Drink. Who was the publisher of this book? This guy. It's a house of cards. But if you have the trappings of authority, then people respect you for it. But in the 10,000 copies of this book I've given away, the first run of them, I stapled them myself. Not one person has said, and who is the publisher of this book? You can also use the trapping of credentials. If you want to get backstage at any concert, just find the poster, slap the words All Access on there. It really doesn't even matter if it matches the ones everyone else has. You can get badges that say just about anything. As far as I'm pretty sure there's no government authorized auto repossessor. And of course, you can get printers that laminate badges and print out whatever you want. But the amazing thing is the folks who are working at the gates at concerts, they're not even looking at your credentials. They're looking at your body posture. They're looking at whether or not you match the dress for everyone else. So they're watching the way you talk. And of course, if you want to get past somebody, one of the things you can try is you can do stuff like using the word because. You're like, oh, no, I got to get backstage because they're already tuned out.
They know that you have a reason and that it's going to be a fight if they try to tell you no. So use the word because. You can also use an old sales trick, which is, remember, the person asking the questions is the one in charge of the conversation. So try this next time you want to get past somebody. You walk by, you're like, oh no, I got to get backstage because I got to get backstage in time for the thing. And then they're like, what's going on? They're like, do you know where Becky is? Becky, I'll go find Becky. I'll be right back. And off you go. As long as you're asking questions, you're in charge. I'll tell you what, I'll leave you with one little gem here. If you guys, how many guys fly a lot? How many guys wish you could take twice the liquids past the TSA? Hypothetically. Hypothetically, you know that you guys can only put so many liquids in one of those, I think it's a 1-quart bag. Theoretically, if you had 2 of those bags and they were in different bins, I don't see how the TSA would know. And that's it for me. I'm Brian Brusher. Thank you guys so much.